program. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, bil alameen. It's really happy and blessed today to be graced with one of our fathers, our grandfathers, our teachers, really our custodians, really here in the UK for the Nigerian Muslim community and the Muslim community at large. Alhamdulillah, we're very blessed to be graced by the presence of our dear Professor Moshood Baderin. Alhamdulillah, he is a professor of laws at SOAS University and also is a resident consultant at Muslim Association of Nigeria. So he's known to many of us. Alhamdulillah, for those who have not yet aware of him, inshallah, this will be a great opportunity to gain some insight into his, alhamdulillah, his journey so far. Alhamdulillah, as people would have seen from what we've been sharing on the screen, the title of today's exploration or session is around trying to get an insight into how to pursue a career in academia. One might wonder, why is this featuring in the Muslims in Business series? And it's because of the realization that actually within the generation just gone and also my generation, perhaps people aren't as aware of the opportunities to actually form a career from academia, from research, from that path of becoming a professor in your field of expertise. So inshallah, we'll be gaining some insight today on what that looks like, what a typical, or maybe the career path isn't typical, and that's what we'll find out today. But inshallah, before we kick off, I'll give our dear father and Sheikh an opportunity to introduce himself. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muhammad Tawfiq, thank you so much, for that brief introduction, and also for inviting me actually to be on this platform, which I really, really appreciate, and also to share perhaps maybe my insights into my being an academic, and also perhaps I can stimulate interest within our youth and our community to be academics. Now, I've been an academic in the UK since 1997. I rose through the ranks from University of Nottingham. I did both my master's. I did my undergraduate studies, both my pre-university, that is secondary, diploma, and then first degree, and also my professional, because I'm a lawyer, so my professional law training, I did all those in Nigeria. Then I came to the UK in the 90s to do my master's at University of Nottingham. After my master's, I proceeded to do my PhD at Nottingham. And then things have developed from there. So I rose through the ranks. As we'll be talking about. I started teaching in the UK in 1997 during my PhD. Because by the time I finished my master's, I was familiar, but people, the department was familiar with my abilities. So I started doing my I was a graduate teaching assistant teaching public international law, because my LLM was in public international law. So so I rose through the ranks. After I finished in Nottingham, I moved on to other universities, University of the West of England. I also taught at Southampton University, then Brunel. I became a professor in 2000. It was quite quick because, although I said I rose through the rank, but by calculation, my rise was quite quick. I became a full professor in 2006. That's about 15 years ago at Brunel University. And then I moved to SOAS in 2007. So I've been at SOAS since 2007. So that's
Can I follow up quickly on the point around you being a teaching assistant? So is this typical for a typical PhD kind of candidate, that they'd be offered an opportunity to teach and perhaps earn an income whilst studying? Can you help us demystify what a PhD program actually is? Are you paying to do further studies after paying for a master's, or actually is it now time where somebody's actually, the university perhaps is paying you to further on do more research? Can you help demystify that for us, at least here in the UK?
Thank you. Thank you very much. That perhaps maybe might bring us to, you need qualifications. If you want to be an academic, you know the requisite qualifications, and things have changed over time. Now, in the 1970s, you might not need a PhD to be an academic, both in the UK and in Nigeria, everywhere. Then up into the 1990s, you could still, I got my full appointment even before I defended my PhD. When I submitted I had already finished, I've submitted. My PhD was in view. Now, in the 1990s, it was possible, but now, hardly will any university take a person on without a PhD. That is, if you want to be an academic. That is, the Doctor of Philosophy in whatever field you want to do, because it's part of the training. To answer your question, while most universities, will provide, because the presumption is that when you are doing the PhD, perhaps, it is a trajectory towards becoming an academic. So there's the opportunity. So you find out that in the academia, you find out that, usually there is a position called GTAs, graduate teaching assistants.
Yeah.
So you find GTAs are available. So and all universities try, although sometimes it's not possible for all PhD students to have to teach. But there's that opportunity. When opportunity shall arise, PhD students will apply for the graduate teaching assistant position. So they do tutorials, they do seminars. Sometimes they do full teaching. Even in recent times, you find GTAs convening modules, looking after modules and things like that. So usually that is available and you get paid for it.
Yeah.
You get paid for it. Things have changed over time. People are paid per hour. You get paid per hour for, the number of hours you teach. And sometimes if a PhD candidate is very, very good, and if, for example, if your area of research is very distinct, you can get a lot of teaching. But usually, supervisors will want to prioritize your finishing your PhD over doing too much, work. So GTAs are available, that is graduate teaching assistants, and all universities provide that opportunity for PhD candidates, in the presumption that perhaps maybe they might follow the academia, but it's not necessary. Not everybody who does a PhD goes into academia.
Understood. And I'd like to get some clarification at this point here, because the way in which you're using the term academic or academia, it sounds fairly exclusive. So is it you're only an academic once you've kind of got the professorship? Or let's say if you're pursuing a PhD, that might be like a 6-year PhD, would that PhD student be considered an academic? At what point are you considered an academic?
Yeah, part of being in the academia, PhD is part of it, really, because a PhD itself, although it involves research, but involves a whole lot of things. That is, it trains you, you acquire sort of, teaching skills. You acquire academic skills and things like that. So I would say from PhD upwards, one could say that, well, a person is within the academics, but a PhD itself is in-depth research. Because when we talk about, and that is, in being in academia, a lot of the time people only look at teaching. It's not only about teaching. Teaching is just a tip of the iceberg. Being an academic, the academia requires you to teach, to be very good in teaching and learning, and also to research, and also, administration. You have to, educational administration. And even now, more responsibilities are being added on. People need to prove the ability. We call, there's another element called KT, knowledge transfer. You should be able to, prove that, the knowledge, you can transfer it. And also we talk a lot about, particular in relation to research, about impact. Today, previously, nobody was expected to prove the impact of their research. You just do it, and people, if it's useful for people, you'll be able to see it later. But now, part of the training is to be able to establish actually the impact that the research you are doing is making on society. So it has become really much more competitive now. Going into academics now is very, very competitive. Universities are very, very careful in selecting people, because you don't want to select the wrong person. Because if you select a wrong person, you become stuck with it. I've been a head of department involved in the recruitment, and very, very, sometimes, it's not compulsory that, people are appointed. If people are looked critically, they may not appoint, because universities don't want. So it's very, very competitive now. But yes, I want to say that it's incredibly fulfilling. If I have been interested in academia right from the beginning, based on one's Islamic background, as Muslims, that hadith, we all know it, that, the best of you, the best of you is who learns the Quran and teaches it. I apply it to all knowledge, and the Prophet himself was said to have said that, anybody who teaches a person something, and that person practicalizes it, you get rewards even when they are using that knowledge. So since when I was even in the madrasa, I had the habit of bringing our juniors together to teach them. Even when I was in the university, I was teaching in Nigeria. I was teaching our juniors. So the first thing is to be interested. One, because academia can be a little bit isolatory. It can be isolatory in the sense that, because it demands so much, So the interest, you have to be interested, seriously interested in it. And then the qualifications come into the picture. And as I said, apart from the undergraduate degree, the master's degree, you need a PhD. Now, after the PhD, then if you are very, very lucky and you are very good during your PhD, your GTA was very good, you got a lot of teaching and things like that. If you are lucky, opportunities might just arise right when you finish, and then you get into the main system. Because now, because of the competitiveness, if you look at many universities, there are so many PhD holders who are still doing, part-time teaching. They are still doing GTA work, even though they finished. Some are, postdoctoral research fellows. And it has really, academia is very, very competitive now, but it's a good thing. If one works very hard and you put your foot on the ladder, it can be very, very rewarding. Look, apart from, imparting knowledge, it's a profession whereby you continue to learn and renew your knowledge every day, every time, because you want to be ahead of your student, at least one step ahead of your students, especially now. You want to be one step ahead of your students. There is a fallacy, if I might say it, Bernard Shaw, people used to refer to Bernard Shaw's, he did a play, The Man and Superman, in which he said, those who can't do, teach. It's a fallacy. It's a fallacy. Actually, and I actually usually contradict that, because Aristotle, 400 BC, before Christ, actually stated, he said that those who know, do, but those who understand, teach. This is what Aristotle said, because he taught Alexander the Great. And you find out that in Israel, he said that Alexander is great. Alexander would not have been great if Aristotle has not taught him. So he said, those who know, do, but those who understand, teach. So, if you want to be an academic, especially in the UK, it's not only knowing the doctrine of your discipline. You have to really understand it and engage, critique it. You have to push the limits of knowledge. So anybody who is just, complacent, okay, I'm happy with where I am, they will not flourish in academia. You need to, it's not only about doctrine, particularly in the UK. It's not about doctrine. It's about, and this is why, everything that happens in society, it is because people are challenging the known all the time in academia, and people are challenging the known. So you find, based on research, based on challenges, new ideas come, and things continue to change and change and change. So it's very, very rewarding, but also very, very demanding. You cannot be a lazy person and be an academic. You just have to, you continue working 24/7.
Yeah.
Anytime you are thinking of something, you are thinking of another thing.
Yeah.
So it's really very, very, but very rewarding, as I said.
Thanks for those insights. One question that's often thought about when it comes to academia, these people considering it, is this topic of tenureship. And I know it might be different in the UK compared to the US, but we know that, okay, that this is what basically professors aspire for, tenureship, so that you can start to do independent research and not fair repercussions and that sort of thing. So and people want to know that there's job security ultimately, especially if the space is very competitive, new ideas coming through. You want to make sure you can continue to feed your family if you invest these years into the profession. So could you tell us a little bit about tenureship and how that works?
Yes, tenureship is, different from the UK and the US. It used to, for example, in the UK, as I said previously, you could get a full tenure right away. If you are in the right, you apply, you can get a lectureship. That is where you start, a full-time lectureship. And then if you continue to do well, publish, do well, you rise up through the ranks from lectureship, become a senior lecturer, then reader, then professor. Now, the term professor is not used lightly in the UK. In the US, anybody who works with any academic is called a professor. That is not the situation in the UK. In the UK, there's a system whereby, you enter into the system as a lecturer, lectureship. So a lecturer is at the bottom. Then if you do well and you rise, perhaps maybe between 3-4 years, you become a senior lecturer. Then after senior lecturer, you rise, you become a reader. Then from reader, some call it associate professor. Then from reader, you become a professor. So if people in the UK, when people are addressed as professors, it's not just because they teach in university. They are there. They have reached the head of their career. But now, as I said, because it's been becoming really competitive, because of the fact that full tenureship is really very competitive now, and it relates to the cuts. Even in the UK, many universities are under strain. So rather than employing people full time, a lot of the time when there are teaching vacancies available, many universities will just advertise fixed term positions, maybe for 1 year, for 2 years. Maybe they just want somebody to teach a number of hours. And in such instances, there's no job security in that regard. But people continue to do it because it's like having one leg in. If, for example, you have a fixed term appointment of maybe 2 years, it's okay, I will take it. After 2 years, if it is not renewed, that's it. Your job is gone. But people continue to do it because if you are in, by the time you do the 2 years and you are really doing very well, they know your abilities. If there's opportunity for full-term tenure, you apply, you have proved your merit already. So that's, the UK system. I don't want to discourage anybody. There are still many, if you look in the newspapers, and if you look in jobs.ac.uk, there are many universities still, advertising full tenures. You see lectureships, senior lectureships, But from my own experience, sometimes, we advertise just 2 positions, a lecturer, senior lectureship. Just 2 positions. If you see the number of applications we received, they go into the hundreds. And you start, now sifting it down, breaking it down. And what usually, we look for is, teaching experience. You can demonstrate that by presenting evidence of students' feedback on your teaching. And then research publications. Research publication is very, very important. It's very difficult for anybody to rise as an academic without, in-depth research. And it's not, when we talk about publications, it's not about self-publishing. It's not that, well, you just write something, and especially today, you just publish it on the internet, or maybe you have money, you can print, you write, and you just print your book. No, it's not self-publishing. It's, peer-reviewed articles. This is why it is really very, tedious and very, very demanding in that regard. And then, also demonstrate your administrative ability and things like that. but it's
And just,
doable. I mean,
yeah,
it's very, very doable. So
thank you. And just
yeah.
to follow up on this, not with it not being self-publication and actually a proper peer-reviewed kind of publication, how does one get their names attached to that? How do you get onto a research project that will end up being peer-reviewed? What is that process like?
Well, I mean, it depends on the discipline. There are certain disciplines whereby, I mean, to be able, for example, in the pure sciences, if you really want to do real research, I mean, a lot of funds go into it. I mean, the STEM subjects. I mean, you need money to use the laboratory, you need money to buy the chemicals and things like that. I mean, in such instances, it depends on one's proposal. I mean, in relation to, and sometimes, I mean, students, I mean, academics usually will attach themselves to, I mean, professors who have made a name, and then they rise through the ranks. But in the social sciences, not all research necessarily need, I mean, funding. You know, funding is very good, because if you have funding, even in social sciences, if you have funding, it makes your research easy, because without funding, you can buy yourself out of teaching. You know, you use that money, I mean, to make an advert for somebody to cover for you. So you leave teaching and you concentrate on the research you write. So you can, I mean, with funding, it makes it easy. But in social sciences, even without funding, you are required to, with teaching, with administration, with everything, to publish at least one peer-reviewed article every year. You have to publish every year. Many universities now are increasing it. Our university now, there's a review. You know, our new vice chancellor is saying that, well, he wants to raise the game, that, I mean, at least 2 high quality publications every year. People are grumbling because, I mean, teaching itself is very, very demanding. You know, teaching takes so much time to prepare your teaching, to teach. And if you want to really do research, you need quality time. It's not do a piece now, then you go and do something. By the time you come, you know, you need quality time to be able to sit down and reflect over things and do in-depth research. And this is why, I mean, the demand, I mean, a lot of the time, you find academics, I mean, many times they don't have social life. In the night, I mean, they burn the candle because they want to, you cannot, there's no excuse. You cannot say because of my teaching, I can't publish. You know, so, I mean, for social sciences, I mean, if you have a very good project, I mean, especially now, I mean, there are so many, there's many research funding institutions putting money out there, particularly now, the impact of COVID on many different aspects of life. You find so much money outside there. So people, you do a proposal indicating how, you know, I mean, the research you want to do will have an impact, I mean, also on society, maybe in industry and things like that. And it's also competitive. You put it in, if you are lucky, I mean, if you get the funds, fine. Then you can buy yourself out of teaching. You can have money to travel, to visit other libraries, to find material, to do your interviews, and you can, I mean, you can get research out. But in social sciences, as I said, whether you have grants or not, your research has to continue. But in the pure sciences, I mean, because of the nature of, I mean, their research, usually, I mean, there's more funding in those areas.
Yeah. So I mean, many of us on the call have been at university and known that perhaps some classes you look forward to more than others because of the lecturer. So we all have our feelings as to what makes a good lecturer. So I had one, for instance, who never used to use PowerPoint. So just was kind of engaged from his thoughts and write on the board and give you handouts. And it was very refreshing as opposed to somebody just clicking through PowerPoint. So in your estimation, for people who are aspiring to be on this path, what are some of those key characteristics that distinguish a good teacher from a great teacher?
Well, I mean, a good teacher, I mean, teaching is like it's like an art. It's like acting, actually. It's like you're on a stage. And you have to do it very well. You have to carry your students along with you. You have to carry your audience along with you. One characteristic of a good teacher is the ability to simplify even the most difficult topic. You know, I mean, and it takes time to be able to get to know that, because students come to lectures in order to gain, you know, a proper understanding of, because I mean, anybody, we use books, we use textbooks, Students who come to university can read English. They could have just gone to the bookshop and bought the book and read it themselves. But they come to university not that, for the lecturers to expatiate and to, make things. So the one should try as much as possible, clarifying, the ability to be able to clarify things, to make things easy for students to follow. And over time, based on training, it has been identified that, teaching, this is why it's usually now called teaching and learning. It shouldn't be only didactic, whereby students just sit and you continue talking to them. Try as much as possible to make it interactive and bring it to life. Showing examples, letting them know, how the topic you are teaching actually, affects their life in a way that they can relate to. Now, I'll give you one example. Now, there's a lot of, pessimism because of what happens across. I don't teach public international law any longer. When I used to teach public international law, even in those days, when bombing in Iraq and things like that, people were so pessimistic about international law. And students come and talk about the fact that people come, with the argument, well, international law doesn't work. There are people. So what I normally do in order to attract when I open my class, the first thing I talk to people is, we're to introduce international law to them. I'll just tell them, leave the big issues aside first. People will always want to talk about, I said, leave the big issues. Let us talk about the small issues and be able to say. Now, I asked them, how many of you have mobile phones? Everybody will put down their hand, they have mobile phones. I say, okay, and international students, when last did you call home? Yesterday. When last did you call home? So I'll ask students and I say, okay, did you ever think at all, what facilitated your being able to pick up a phone here in London, press some numbers, call, and somebody picks it up in Nigeria and you communicate with them? Have you ever thought how this works? Sometimes I will ask, during when I say, have you ever also thought how you put a stamp? You post a letter from London, put a stamp on it, you want to send it to Ghana. You just put it in a red box and somebody in Ghana receives it. Have you? I said, that is international law in action. It is international law. People then, you see their faces bright up. They never ever think about it. I say international law affects your simple, common, everyday lives. So if you look at the big things, then you see by that, you bring them in and people start, so it depends. People do it in different ways, but the important point is to be able to carry your students along. Difficult issues, simplify them, and clarity. Clarity in delivery, and also try as much as possible to be ahead of the students, especially now. Students in the UK come to class already equipped with a lot of knowledge. They're equipped with a lot of knowledge through the internet and things like that. So one should try as much as possible, to be preemptive of possible questions. But sometimes, if you don't know, you don't know. You tell them, well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer now. Don't try to beat up, because students are not stupid. Don't try to beat about the bush. Okay, that's a very good question. I'll provide you an answer later. So if you are transparent and students will see your genuineness, rather than, so there are different ways, and lecturers are different one from the other. But the important thing is, for you to be able to communicate, to deliver, and also get feedback. Don't talk all on. A little bit, involve the students, take questions, move on, and carry them along. PowerPoint is good. It depends on how you use it.
Indeed. I agree. So for everyone with questions, can I ask that you type them, and inshallah, towards the end of the session, we'll have an opportunity to read them out to the professor, and inshallah, we'll go through them then. Now I wanted to take the discussion to those opportunities that might avail themselves to you once you, I guess, become established in your field. So we're aware that you did some work with the UN, whether it was the situation in Sudan. So could you share with us how the opportunity came about and what was it?
Yes, alhamdulillah. And it relates to if you're an academic, and that's one of the benefits of putting your name out there, publishing. If you publish high quality material in esteemed journals, or with, esteemed publishers like Oxford University Press, Cambridge. And people read your work. Your name or your identity goes ahead of you. It brings students to the university itself. Because they already know. And then when things occur now, and also it also relates to, one's ability to push the limits of knowledge. Using my own example, you see, what helped my own research? I do law, and my research is in relation to Islamic law and international human rights law. And this is why people need to really reflect. It's about what impact, what do you really want to do? Now, in the 1990s, you find out that, there was a lot of tension between Muslim nations, between Muslim nations and the West. It was they and us, the other, and it was really adversarial, particularly in relation to human rights issues, international law. And you find that Huntington wrote that article that became very popular, A Clash of Civilizations. And that is why people were looking at it. Now, when I read the article, I said, should the world just be like this? Should we just be presuming that people cannot, even different civilizations, cannot really live together? So that's what actually motivated me. And my PhD was on, international Islamic law, international human rights law, and Islamic law in modern Muslim majority countries. Because all the materials that were available then was that Islamic law is completely adversarial to human rights law, that Muslim nation states cannot guarantee human rights. And I thought I disagreed with that. Based on my own background of Islamic law. I said Islam and the provisions of Islamic sources talks about human dignity and things like that. So I argue that, well, I want my research to counter the adversarial perspective. I want to bring a harmonistic. Look, yes, there could be areas of differences, but I want to highlight the common areas of common ground. There are so many areas of common ground. If you understand the areas of common ground, we can build on that actually to resolve the areas of differences. So when I started, and people thought, well, we want to do the impossible. When I'm in my seminars at Nottingham, then, when I put posters, a lot of people will come, they say, this African guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, So they will come, and I will try to convince them, I'll try to bring in verses of the Quran. And eventually people started getting interest that, what this person is talking. And I'll say, go and check it. I'm not making this up. Actually, even my supervisor, when I talk about issues, when we are talking about even social security and things like that, I bring evidence. He said, Moshood, I say, I'm not making it up. Find this in this. I'll go to the library, get a hard disk, show it to them. And then, so people started getting interest. Now, eventually, when I finished my PhD, OUP published it, and you didn't believe this. The 20 years of 9/11 is being celebrated now. I was teaching. I was on the faculty of University of the West of England when 9/11 occurred. I remember vividly. I was sitting in my sitting room watching television in Bristol. Then when it occurred, it was just like when that occurred, although it was very devastating, but it raised Islamic law just became an issue in relation to international law. Now, people started calling, FCO started calling, because they know my writings already. That, okay, you are talking about this, what of this that has happened? And things that, so, I was really under pressure. Everybody, all the armed forces, in Warminster, they were calling, FCO calling, everybody just calling. So I just became overnight, people wanted to know. So that is how, and I started writing. I said, despite that, I started, my writings, I started critiquing that, the 9/11 event, it cannot be justified under Islamic law. And I started writing in that regard. So there was a lot of interest. So the FCO started getting in touch. I started advising them, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I started advising them in relation to, it was about having an alternative narrative, an alternative superior discourse. And I said it exists everywhere. In all civilizations, you have different narratives on issues. There's no narrative that is monolithic. You cannot say, well, a monolithic. We need to understand the alternative view as well. So, I mean, and you find out that in Sudan, when the war, Sudan has been in war for a very, very long time. And the UN, they were following my writings and they thought, I mean, this approach that this guy is talking about, perhaps maybe it can be something that can be useful to actually sort the problem in the Sudan. So when I was appointed the independent expert, I went to Sudan, and that was what I engaged the government of Sudan on. You know, they were very happy to have me, and they were talking about the fact that, well, you know, we are Muslims, we have our own approach to things. I said, yes, but I'm Muslim as well. I was engaging them based on Islamic principles, and eventually, you know, I mean, they try to, I mean, improve their human rights situation. Today, you know, I'm quite very, very busy. A whole lot of issues. When Afghanistan occurred, I did, I mean, the BBC got in touch with me. I did a shot on BBC. You find so many other foreign, now a whole lot of the time, I parry things. I said, no, we're just, because I mean, it's eating. So it depends on the area of your research. And if you do it well and you publish, you know, it puts your name ahead. People read and, you know, they want to get informed. Not everybody might agree with your point of view, but the important thing is to be bold, to push the limits of knowledge, and also, I mean, try as much as possible to justify your position. You know, I have PhD students, particularly those who are working in the area of Islamic law. It's very, very challenging. You have PhD students sometimes who are working in the area of Islamic law who are very afraid. I mean, they are very afraid to, because they feel that, well, I can't say this. If I say this, you know, something might happen when I go back home and things like that. It can be very, very challenging. But as long as you are bold, do your research well, justify it with classical sources, push the limit of knowledge, you'll be able to, I mean, put your name out there.
Yeah, yeah. How do you, especially for those who are looking to pursue academia within, I guess, the with some element of Islam related to it, how do you kind of balance trying to push the edge of kind of research and what's possible with essentially cherry picking from the sources to fit your own narrative? How do you ensure that you're not, I guess, falling into that and making sure that basically the ideas that you're putting forward are, I guess, cohesive with how the religion has been understood by throughout time, essentially? Yeah. How do you make sure it's grounded?
Yes, that's, I mean, it's difficult, but that's also, I mean, important. One has to have a very good background in the Islamic sources. In my own case, in Islamic law. Now, you know, I mean, cherry picking can be either positive or negative. Now, for example, now you find out that there are, if one does one's research well, I mean, and this is usually when I was in Sudan, when I was engaging with, I mean, some of the scholars and people in office. Sometimes people will just throw the argument. When you are saying, you say, okay, give me a source, give me the Quran says, Hatu burhanakum. When they say, well, we are Muslims, I say, provide me your evidence. They will just say there's ijma on it. I say, ijma, okay, show me the source of the ijma. You find out that the term that there's agreement, there's ijma on this. People just use it freely. And a lot of the time when people say there is ijma, there's consensus on this, everybody will just shut up. Ask them, okay, show us the consensus. By the time you go into, you say there's no consensus there at all because there are differences. There are some differences in that regard. So sometimes, I mean, if you do your own research well, many of the issues, now, for example, look at, I mean, many of the issues that I deal with, I'm writing one article now for a book chapter, particularly in relation to what's happening in Afghanistan now. You find out that, I mean, one of the spokesperson of Afghanistan was, I mean, and people sympathize. I mean, many of my colleagues say they sympathize, even Westerners sympathize with the Taliban. They say, well, we really salute these people in the face of Western pressure. They still stand to say that what they want to do is Islam and things like that. Now, somebody now sent me the clip asking me questions. The spokesman spoke about 2 weeks ago regarding women doing sports. And so, and in his narrative, I mean, one understand if one is complaining about what they wear when they are doing sport. He said Islam does not allow women to do sports. Do you get? And he said the position. He said there's no difference of opinion. All the jurists agree that women should not do sports. And one of my colleagues said, I said it's nonsense. I mean, how can you say that Islam say women should not do sports? I mean, that cannot, even without looking at the sources, that cannot be reasonable. Because Riyadh, I mean, we need some element of sports to keep fit. So why are you saying that? So if you say, I will not even look at the sources because there are certain statements that actually contradict, So I said, no, I mean, and I gave examples. I said the Prophet used to run with his wife, Aisha. They run races no more than one time. And so I said that, well, perhaps, I mean, and these are some of the issues I do challenge. Give me your evidence to show that, I mean, Islam does not allow this, and by the time you start looking, you'll be able to see that, well, actually, and many, I mean, contemporary writers, there are so many principles, there are different principles in Islam, such as the principles of maslaha, I mean, maqasid, the objective of the Sharia, which people are using, and all these are classical principles. People are using them to look. I come with a clear mind. I mean, with an objective mind. I don't, and this is why a lot of the time, people feel at home when I'm discussing my issues. I don't come with a pre-conditioned mind that, well, I'm speaking with an enemy. That, well, no. When you are dealing with the West is so bad. If it is so bad, we will not be living here. That's just the truth. If it is so bad, you not. I mean, so I come, if there are areas which, I mean, there are issues, I highlight them. And if there are possible ways of getting out of them, I indicate them. If they are not, I indicate them. So I don't come with a premonition that, well, no, Islam and the West can never be, they always have to be at loggerheads. No, that's not what Islam teaches. So it's not about cherry picking, but a proper understanding of the concepts, a proper understanding of the classical materials, and looking at them. And actually, when you say pushing the limits, it's not about pushing the limits of the Quran or the Sunnah, but pushing the limits of interpretations that people put out there, pushing the limits of the understanding of people on particular issues. And a lot of the time, as I said, I mean, most of the time, I mean, it's about ijma. People will just want to shut you down by saying that there's consensus. That's okay. You give me that evidence of the consensus, and I will give you one evidence of a very established scholar who has a different opinion on this. So it's not about cherry picking per se, but looking deeply into the sources, and then, I mean, engaging with them. And sometimes, if it is necessary due to changes in time, to change certain opinions, not the provisions of the Quran or the Sunnah, but opinions of scholars. There's nothing in Islamic law that says one cannot do that.
Barakallahu feek. Alhamdulillah. This has been a very fascinating discussion. Inshallah, we'll take one of the questions that have come through, and I encourage anyone else who has questions to please type them. So the question goes, Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh, Professor. As a lecturer, what are your advice or provisions for students to catch up after COVID-19 online lectures? What is your experience lecturing online during COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, it has really been a very, what do you call it? I mean, useful experience. When we started, when COVID came and everything had to go online, it was very, very, very difficult. We all complained. We're working day and night. Means you have to convert all your, I mean, in classroom, face-to-face teaching, you have to convert them into electronic online material. It was really very tough. And you also have to find a way to ensure that the students are there, the students are following. They are there. It's not that just they're putting up their, what do you call it? I mean, they have just logged in and gone away. You find ways of making sure. But by the time, I mean, we got to the middle and ended, one has quite learned a lot, and many of the students also benefited from it. But we cannot, I mean, actually say that, well, face-to-face teaching has to vanish completely, because students are not doing distance learning. They are doing on-campus interaction and meeting people from other countries is also very, very useful. So most universities, what they are, particularly my university that I know of, most universities, I mean, when things settle, even from next academic session, they'll be doing what they call blended teaching. I mean, online will continue, but you find that in between, there'll be opportunities for students who are in London to come onto campus, in order to interact, and also perhaps maybe to have some face-to-face teaching in class. I mean, university teaching has changed with COVID. We cannot, but continue to do online, but then face-to-face will also have to blend into it. And students themselves have to, get used to that. There's benefit in it, in relation to, resources. Many, the infrastructure of many universities have changed a lot. Our library resources have changed. Most of the materials we use now have electronic materials, whereby, students, rather than, libraries not bothering before, they know that everybody will come to the library to take the hard copies. But most of our core books and materials now, the electronic versions are there. Students will just click and they get into the material. So that's one of the benefits of that. But the human interaction is also very, very important. It can be isolatory because you just sit in your room and following a lecture or participating in it. But I think it has its benefits. So blended teaching is the way forward, I believe, and I hope students will be able to cope with that as well.
So as we wait for any additional last questions, can you give, I guess, your last golden piece of advice or nuggets for those who are considering pursuing a career in academia? Then inshallah, I'll allow our Ustaz Absalam to round off the session, inshallah. But over to you first, Professor. Any last golden pieces of advice?
Jazakumullah khairan jaza. I would say, as I said, the academia is a highly rewarding, profession. I have not regretted a day. My knowledge continues to increase as an academician. And when you see your students graduate, you are impacting on lives. You are impacting on lives. And I would suggest, especially because this is a Muslim platform, it's not only about money. It's about your quality as a human being, and knowledge is very, very important in improving our quality as human beings. In the UK, particularly in many of the universities, in the social science areas and things like that, there's still need for more Muslims to be in the academia. In my faculty, in a faculty of nearly 40 academicians, the number of Muslims there are just about 3. So it's really very, very important that, people, although when you first step on the ladder, you may not, the pay sometimes puts people away. If a person who has done a PhD coming on the ladder, when we started in the 1990s, my first, pay was just about 20-something thousand with a PhD. You won't believe this. Although things were a little bit better then. Now, the average the step is about 34,000. A lot of people are spending much money doing PhD. But if you rise through, by the time you get to a reader, it's really, and also the other little things, consultancy, many of the UN work, as I mentioned, FCO, you find, people asking for expert advice. You can make money, your publications, your royalties, and things like that. So, it's, I will encourage, and it gives you self-respect. And also, it puts you on a pedestal in society, especially if you have reached the top echelon of your discipline. So I'll call, I know this is a business platform, but I will encourage anybody who has an interest, to try as much as possible, to consider it. And if you need further advice, you can ask me. We can, talk about how even professionals on business, like professionals, many universities are appointing what they call professors of practice.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if you are very, very good, you have been in industry for a very, very long time, they want you to bring your experience to practice into, so the professors of practice. Mm-hmm. And we just appointed 2 at SOAS. Mm-hmm. So, if anybody wants advice on that, but it's very, very rewarding. The academia.
Barakallahu feek, sir. Barakallahu feek. I've added our teacher into the shot so that he can also give a few words, and I'm sure he will give you a big thanks for gracing us with your presence. So, Bismillah.
Barakallah fiqh, Tawfiq. Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wallahi, jazakumullahu khairah. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much.
I'm on my way coming from Nigeria, coming from the airport, coming home right now. And subhanAllah, I listened to every bit of the advice you've given us. The first point that I would like to reiterate that the professor added is, yes, is the MRB series, is the Muslim business series. And why do we want to do business Muslims? It's because, as the professor said, the Muslims are backward in the business world, not only in academia, but in other professional areas, which definitely added to the level of poverty within the Muslim community. Right? So we want to let the Muslim know that everything is not haram, like the professor mentioned. The prohibitive school of thought is so popular within our community, so much so that the Muslim restrict themselves. They have this restricted mindset about everything. لِمَا تُحَرِّمُ مَا حَلَّ اللَّهُ لَكَ. If Allah Ta'ala don't make something haram, why do we have this restrictive backward mindset? Why are there over 40-something academics in Professor Baderin's faculty and only few Muslims are there, less than 5 are there? Why can't we push further as Muslims? And I think that's the first point. The reason why we have put the topic together is to see how we can generate that interest. In fact, Prof, I'll probably be one of your first students in helping me to complete my PhD now.
Inshallah.
Now that you have promised that your door is open for some of us that we are interested in completing our academy, and professor will do something like that. But I'm not a professor, but I'm just somebody who is teaching from experience, industrial experience in the Warwick Business School classrooms. Now, that's the first point. The second point, which is going to be of a benefit, and I know we are recording this, is that, inshallah rahman, when we have young Muslim brothers and sisters who are interested in making life or financial, need out of academics. We're not talking about IT now. We're not talking about accounting or engineering now. We're talking about academia, going into an academic environment to earn a living. The Prof had also mentioned that it is highly rewarding. It might not be from the short term, but in the long term, it is highly rewarding. I've got professors, friends who are being funded into hundreds of thousands of pounds. Because I think what people don't know is about the financial reward. Everybody wants to be a doctor. Everybody wants to be an engineer. Everybody wants to be an accountant, like we all are. But very little are thinking about academics. And now that some of us from the industry background, we are also part-timing in the academia. We saw what's in there. So with my experience at All Business School and Warwick Business School, I can see what's going on. And from that classroom, and I'm happy to say humbly to you, Professor, from that classroom, I won a lot of training contracts with Aston Martin, with Jaguar Land Rover. I go in there to do my corporate training. And that is from academia. That's not from my, daily consultancy in the office. From the academia, there are students from Aston Martin that will come there and say, oh yeah, can you come and train us in our company? And then I will throw them the invoice of my corporate training. So from there are a lot of opportunities as well. And when I saw that, I feel like, I think we have underestimated the size or the ability for us to be able to make financial gains from us being academics. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you, Professor Baderin, and to preserve you for us, because you are our pride and we love you so much in there. And we ask Allah to accept this from you as an act of ibadah. Jazakumullahu khairan. So finally, as you have mentioned before, you would help us with this mentoring if we all come into your door. And inshallah, please expect that we'll be coming soon.
Definitely, inshallah.
Jazakumullahu khairan. Tawfiq, over to you.
Barakallahu feek. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Ustaz, and Barakallahu feek to our professor. Alhamdulillah, we're just 2 minutes over time. Alhamdulillah, Barakallahu feek. I promise that we'll keep it time boxed because as we know, we are trying to show that as Muslims we're not always going to be late to things and kind of extend things longer than advertised. So alhamdulillah, we'll bring it to a close here. Barakallahu fiqh once again to our dear professor. Once again, I'm going to reiterate, we love you for the sake of Allah, for everything you do for our community. SubhanAllah, you're one of the unsung heroes, and only Allah will be able to reward you in the way. And we ask that Allah grants you and your family Jannah Firdaus and goodness and ease in this world and the next. Barakallahu fiqh. And thank you everyone who joined us today, and those watching us from YouTube. Inshallah, we'll continue to pump out these programs. All we ask is that you continue to support us, 1, by attending, 2, by sharing with friends and family, and 3, inshallah, put your money where your mouth is. Support some of the programs we're putting on. We're always sharing details in the groups around fundraising. So please do dig deep and help support us in putting on these programs. Barakallahu fiqh once again, Professor. We thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for attending today. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
السلام عليكم
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.